Okay, good.
Good to go, man?
Yeah,
All right, it's 6:36. We're gonna start the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee. Okay, would y'all please stand for the invocation, please? Ms.
Dear Heavenly
Deborah.
Father, dear Heavenly and gracious Father, again, we stand before you asking that you give us insight on what we are to do this evening, Lord Jesus. Just guide us, Father, and just help us do what's best for our city and our citizens. In Jesus' holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
Y'all
Amen.
please stay standing while we do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please be seated. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and swear in a new commissioner, Shayne Phillips, by Assistant Attorney General Greg. Yes, sir.
If you would stand, Mr. Phillips, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office as member of the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee for the City of Terrell, Kaufman County, Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, and the codes and ordinances of the City of Terrell. And I further do solemnly swear that I have neither directly nor indirectly paid, offered, or promised to pay, contributed or promised to contribute any money or valuable thing to secure my appointment or the confirmation thereof, so help me God. Lower your hand and congratulations. And yes, indeed, and with the permission, I will excuse myself and hope you all have a good meeting.
Thank you, sir. Welcome aboard, sir. All right. As we get started, is everyone here from visitors that wants to talk to us in regards to anything not on the agenda tonight? No, we're empty tonight. Okay. We're gonna have we're gonna discuss the approval of the minutes from July 27, 2023. Commissioners, do I have a?
Motion that we approve the minutes from July 27, 2023.
I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 27, 2023 for the CIAC. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. For all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion carries. Mr. Snap will now come up and,
So luckily, you get to hear someone else speak than me. But who we have with us today is Melissa Bunger and Eddie Haas. They're with Freese and Nichols. They are the same organization that did our impact fees with Steve Rogers back in 2019. As you recall, this is every 5 years, and we're at the end of this 5-year period. So we're wrapping this up, and we're going to walk through the impact fees because it's going to be relatively new to some of you. So today is a lot of informational. When we get to the end, we'll have a schedule, and we're going to have to adhere to that schedule because we have some time frames, and this has to go to the council. But what they're looking for, in a nutshell, is a recommendation from this committee to the council of what the recommended impact fees should be as we impose for the next 5 years. So that's going to be the role that you're going to be in voting on down the road. So tonight is to go through here, one, explain how it is developed and how the numbers crunch. And they do a lot of work in the background of crunching these numbers, so I will let them speak.
thank you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Is there a way I can advance slides? Okay, awesome. So as Chris mentioned, we've been doing this impact fee study for about a year. I'm sure it's been probably a little bit vague memory, but we were here with you twice last summer talking about land use assumptions. Population and employment growth in the city over the next 10 years, which is the horizon we look at for impact fees. And Chris mentioned we have to update them every 5 years due to Chapter 395. So in 5 years, we'll revisit it again, look at growth patterns, and do it all over again. So this evening, we'll be reviewing the process of impact fees and then the growth rates that you've already approved in the last meeting. We'll be talking through the capital improvement plans. So that's the improvements needed to facilitate that growth. And then we'll be showing you some initial calculations of what you could potentially charge for impact fees. And then we'll show you what some of the cities around you are charging, and you can start thinking through how you want to make that recommendation to council. So a little bit about the process. The first step is to look at growth, and that's what we were really doing last summer, and we've had several meetings with you all on that, and that's both population as well as employment growth over the next 10 years. And that's really the basis for our improvements. So we're looking at what improvements, water, wastewater, and roadway, are needed to be able to facilitate that growth. So we're looking at the amount of growth and also where it's happening throughout the city. And so then we develop those capital improvement plans, and then we calculate what is the impact of one single-family home or one new development on water, wastewater, and roadway infrastructure. So what does that cost to the city to be able to provide those services? And then we do multiple stakeholder meetings throughout this process. This is the third meeting we've had with you all. We've had a meeting with council to brief them where we are in the process, and then we'll have another council meeting in July. And then the last step is public hearing and adoption of a new ordinance. So every 5 years, you'll adopt a new ordinance with new impact fees. So what is your role as a CIEC member? You'll oversee development of impact fees. So that's why we have these, 4 meetings with you to go through the process. You've already reviewed the land use assumptions, and today you'll review the capital improvement plans and how we develop them. And then the end, the main, role is to really provide a written recommendation to council, and then council will ultimately decide what they want to implement in the ordinance. So this is just a refresher slide. You've already seen this exact information, but this is the 10-year growth projections that we assumed to develop impact fees. So your current population is around 20,000, or that was the base when we started this project last year. And then we're assuming growth to about 45,000 in the city limits. And you'll notice that the roadway population is slightly smaller than the water and wastewater, and that's because roadway can only include the area within the city limits. Chapter 395 allows us to include the ETJ area, so it's the area outside of the city limits, for water and wastewater only. And so you'll see that that number is a little bit higher because we are including the ETJ. And then we also looked at employment. It's a lot lower growth. There's not as much growth in employment. And so then we use all of that information, we put it into water and wastewater models. The screen in front of you shows the water capital improvement plan. So this shows your existing water system. And a little bit hard to see, but kind of in the central west side is what we call your pump station, and that's where you're getting water from the North Texas Municipal Water District. And then it's getting distributed throughout your city through those black pipelines on the map. And then you'll see all of the red kind of thicker lines. Those are the recommended improvements. So those are improvements that you could potentially build in the next 10 years to facilitate this growth. You'll notice a lot of it's not where you have any existing infrastructure. A lot of it's development that's occurring in new areas in the city. And so it's not upsizing infrastructure, it's really just putting in new infrastructure to be able to have those outreaches covered where we're anticipating development potentially occurring. You'll notice there are a few green lines. Those are projects that are funded by developers, and so those are not impact fee eligible because you are not paying for them. And then the orange represents things that are under design, construction, or have already been completed, but are impact fee eligible because they're helping serve growth. And then the next map shows the wastewater capital improvement plan. The coloring is all very similar. On the wastewater side, you have a treatment plant that takes all the wastewater from the city and treats it. So that's kind of in the far southeast corner. And so wastewater systems are gravity flow, so all of the wastewater wants to go from the north end to the south end of the city because that's the way your topography works. So that's why you have your treatment plant down there. And you'll see a lot of red projects, especially on the, west side and then the northeast corner, and kind of the north area also, where there's just some new development, you don't have existing infrastructure. So a lot of the projects are just to, extend your reaches and help facilitate that growth. There are a few projects in the middle of the city, like projects 1 and 2, that are upsizing existing infrastructure to be able to take some flow from the north end, that's kind of gravity flowing through your system, down to the treatment plant. You'll also notice a few kind of green treatment plant little boxes. And those are package plants that developers are building for initially just to get their development off the ground. They're building these little wastewater package plants. Ideally, you don't have those in your system, and you have just kind of more comprehensive type of system. So we are showing that those will go away in the future, and that you'll have a larger city-owned treatment plant on the far west side as well. So it's kind of similar to the one you have existing, but on the west side to capture that growth on the west side. All right, I'll hand it over to Eddie to cover all the roadway stuff.
Very good, thank you. So Eddie Haas, Freese and Nichols, I led the development of the road program. And I was involved with the last program in 2019 and also the previous one in 2013, so have some history with the program. As Melissa identified, she's identified water, wastewater system improvements. That's rooted in the master plans for each one of those programs. For the roads, we're doing the same thing, basically. This is your thoroughfare plan. This was adopted maybe about a month ago, more or less, but this is the latest and greatest plan that we are rooting our roadway projects in. And the law for roads is very specific, that roads that are identified as arterial or collector class can be considered for impact fee programs. Local streets cannot. So only those projects on the thoroughfare plan that are arterial or collectors are what are incorporated into the plan. On the next slide, we have another unique nuance about roads. So water and wastewater, their service boundary is typically either their water or their system, water or wastewater service area or a CCN. For roads, the law is very specific. It says that road service areas can't be greater than 6 miles. The reason for that is the legislation is saying that wherever new development's occurring, they want projects in the vicinity of where that new development is. And also that projects that are being paid for, say in the north side of town, they're not being spent on projects on the south side of town. So for roads, the service area boundaries are no greater than 6 miles. So on the left image, in the 2019 program, that was the structure that we had before. We had basically 3 service areas. We had, on the red one was the east, the green was the west, and then the kind of the tannish color on the far left of the map there, that was the new service area at the time called Brushy Creek. But now, since the city has grown, it is encroached on those 6 miles. And so we couldn't quite get the service structure to fit. And so we said, you know what, sooner or later, it's going to happen where we're going to have to break the city up into the larger zones. So we went through that effort now, but with an eye towards long-term growth in terms of where your ETJ is. So we have now, rather than 3 service areas, we have 5 service areas. We've kind of renamed the structure altogether. Now we're north, east, south, southwest, and west, okay? So for roads, each one of the calculations is predicated on each individual service area. So you'll see the road CIP, will have some road improvements. We'll do the calculation for each service area, and when we get to the end of the technical work, that's where will be some policy considerations on a collection, right? We'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, so new service area structure as part of this program. On the next slide, we have the image of the previous IFSIP, the Impact Fee CIP. One of the first things we do as part of the update process is determine if on any of those projects, if the roads were built, if there's any excess capacity. We have to ensure that there's capacity to retain the projects in the program. We did that assessment. We also made some adjustments based on on some roadways that would probably never get built. So what we did was 2 counts. You may have seen a whole series of 2 counts around the town. We used the traffic count data to assess the road program. On the next slide is the image of the proposed IFSIP. We have previously from 24 some odd projects, now we have 57 project segments. A significant amount of project increase in the program. The cost of the CIP is $178 million. That's the credited cost. The full cost is $346 million. but we're crediting the cost by 50% per state law. We can talk about that in a minute. But what's the key wording in the legislation is cost necessitated by growth. So Melissa talked about the land use assumptions. That's growth coming to Terrell. They're bringing, that's population and employment. They're bringing impact to the infrastructure. Of the necessitated infrastructure based on that growth, what is that cost that we can consider? So the cost system-wide that's attributable to growth is $132 million, okay? So if we were to collect the absolute maximum amount, we could collect up to $132 million over 10 years. There's still the other half of that equation. Who picks that up? That's your tax base, okay? So, but it's important that we're identifying what's that cost of growth so that development, depending on how you recommend from a collection rate perspective, can decide on how much should new development pay in that fair share cost, okay? So 132 million system-wide for all the projects that are identified. The projects highlighted in red are new projects. The lighter red ones were those that were in the previous program, just so for tracking purposes we know, well, where did it come from? That was in the 2019 program. The darker red ones are newer projects. These are part of the current program that we're contemplating. Those projects highlighted in green are those that are called recoupment projects, projects that were put on the ground. These are city dollars that we're recovering, so we're recouping the cost of that excess capacity. System-wide, we got about 38,800 vehicle miles of capacity that's being provided across the city. The 10-year demand is about 36,600. We feel like we have a really perfectly matched IFSIP, if you will, as part of this program. Okay, the LUA, Melissa talked about population and employment. The reason we look at the two different types of growth is because traffic generation is different. Population translates to dwelling units. Residential generates traffic differently from non-residential, office, commercial, industrial. Those are all different traffic characteristics. So we used a little more of the detail to quantify how much growth will occur by service area and by type. So what you see here is you see broken down by service area, the residential growth in vehicle miles, basic service retail, which translates to industrial, office, and commercial growth. So we've used the projected growth, and this was a very detailed analysis that we worked through with staff, and that's approved development plans that have come through you all. These are anticipated development activity that's likely to happen over the 10 years. So we did a lot of effort to get to those land use assumptions that were presented moments ago, but more importantly, for the roadside, we had to break that up by service area, okay? So what this does is this allocates all that growth into the service areas. We don't have any projects in east. Therefore, and we don't have anticipated growth to occur in this far east service boundary over at least the next 10 years. If something were to change, in 5 years, we're going to be updating the program anyway. We can include it then, okay? So you'll see the breakout of forecasted growth by service area. The southwest service area, the purple highlighted one there on the bottom, that's anticipated to pick up the most of the growth. Obviously, a lot of activity going on down there, followed by the west service area, the green, where we're forecasting a lot of continued growth, particularly if that outer loop facility comes through there in the future. Okay, 36.6 or 36,600 vehicle miles of anticipated forecast. And so the way the calculation works, basically, it's the cost of necessitated capacity, right, divided by service units of growth. So cost per service unit times 50%. Let me talk about that. In 2011, the law changed in that, well, first of all, impact fees, they've been around since 1988. And they started by the Home Builders Association, because in the development process prior to that is a lot of developer agreements, horse trading going on. Some people felt like they didn't get a fair shake. You're contributing right-of-way, but you're contributing right-of-way plus roadway. Deals were made, based on developer agreements. The Developer Association felt like, wait, there's got to be a way to level the playing field here. And so that's how the law was basically enacted through that legislation. It's been in play, it's been challenged, it's been tested and proven. But moreover, in 2011, the development community went down to the legislature and said, guys, we're putting new road improvements on the ground. the ad valorem tax value increases, but we don't get any benefit out of that. So there was a change to the legislation, among other things, in that period in 2011, where the law was changed that a credit analysis has to be conducted to determine what credit should be given back to development or to reduce the cost of the CIP. In the alternative, you just credit the cost of the CIP by 50%, run the calculation, and you move on. In the past, we have credited the cost of the CIP by 50%. The reason we haven't done the credit analysis is because there's the outcome that the fees would be extremely high, and you probably wouldn't want to charge the absolute maximum. We've seen those credit numbers come back anywhere from 70 to 90%. So the idea is that, you know what, we go up to that 50% collection rate, which I think that's where we are now. We're at 50% collection rate as part of the current program, that we probably won't go above that, okay? So that's why at the outset of the study, we decided that we're not going to do the credit analysis. So cost of necessitated capacity that's been credited by 50% divided by service units of growth, that's our cost per service unit. Okay, so what this table does is it summarizes by the new service area boundaries. So you can see the breakout of the $132 million that's eligible or attributable to growth by service area, the projected service units in the second row, and then the calculated cost first of all, we're showing the maximum. And the reason we're showing the maximum is we want to highlight an important fact. That infrastructure is expensive stuff, and someone's going to pay for it. So if new development's not chipping in, that burden falls on your tax base. So for each row, or for each service area, we've calculated what's that full cost, the 100% cost. And then we've credited at the 50%, which then turns into the bottom gray row is in terms of, that's the maximum that you can collect per service unit, okay? So you'll see the numbers range anywhere from 0 in the east because we had no projects, number one. But you see the range from 1387 in the west to a high of 4637 in the east. That's per service unit. That's not the impact fee on a single lot. That's just what it costs to put a unit of road on the ground, of 1 vehicle mile on the ground, okay? So just for comparison purposes, you see down below, under the previous program, what the maximum calculated rates were then, 1504 and 1114 for west and east, and Brushy Creek 0. We're not aligning them because the service boundaries are different, okay? But we wanted to show you, that's what we calculated before. The new numbers are what the current calculation is. So number one, why are the numbers going up so high? Cost of stuff. Things like cost of concrete per square yard or cubic yard from $60 to $120. Things like that are just adding up. So that's why things are going through the ceiling. Even lends more credence to you're not going to collect more than 50%, because when you apply each of this cost per service unit times its equivalent for a single family dwelling, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, you'll see that could get very expensive. Okay, so these represent the new calculated numbers by service area. Any questions on that derivation? It's a lot of technical. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
But do these numbers, are they today, or do they assume escalation?
So we don't want to put the city in a refund situation. So these are unit costs from today based on bid tabs and or unit cost data from 12-month averages, TxDOT numbers, averages, with very minimal, if any, escalation. The reason for that is we're projecting the cost of these roads. Some of these are planned, and we're calculating that cost per service unit based on these numbers. If all of a sudden the costing were to come down over the next 5 or 10 years, we've then overcharged new development. And that would be, they would see that as an inequity, and you'd have a lot of developers, attorneys in here suing the city. So we don't want to put the city in a refund situation. So predicated on today's cost, number one, actual cost and not escalated.
So then what happens, let's say they continue to go up, then how does that benefit the city?
I'm sorry?
Let's say they continue to go up, then doesn't that benefit the
It could.
Okay,
It could benefit the developer if you all decide on a lower collection rate, or it could benefit the city if you decide on a higher collection rate. But you'll see the number here. We ran a scenario. You'll see how that shakes out, okay? You bet. You said you had a bunch. Fire away. All right. Okay.
I have a quick question. If, in the north and the south, there's a few segments on the road plan that you said the lighter red were included in the last.
In the previous program? Yes.
Program, but if they aren't on the ground, are they covered in the previous program, or are you
Yeah.
including them in the cost for this program, since they haven't been built yet?
That's right, since they haven't been built. So for those projects, we've updated the cost of those facilities. So we had a cost estimate then, now we have a more current cost estimate for the project now.
But they're included in this program?
That's correct, yeah.
I mean, is now the time to ask questions?
If you want to focus on the road questions, we can do the roads now, then we get to water, wastewater.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions,
Uh-huh.
even before that, I started taking notes.
Sure.
Because I see this updated water capital improvement plan, but you said something that triggered for me, because we talk about growth, there's a significant amount of growth. If we look at the scale, we're expecting more than double in a decade. And when I look at it though, and I see there's not much growth in employment, that tells me it's people coming to live here, but not necessarily opportunities for work. So why would we be doing that?
Well, the only reason we're looking at those two, that we break it out, is for the traffic generation purposes. They look at it to a certain extent from a residential, non-residential, and a demand perspective for water, wastewater need, okay, by acreage. We look at it for roads. Yes, you're gonna have plenty of employment growth, but you're gonna have more population growth because you are a suburban community to the Metroplex.
So you're saying that, so to clarify, you're saying you're not looking at employment versus
We're looking at them both.
social because
They're both included.
But you can only be included once. If you're a resident here.
Oh, time out. Remember, this is future growth. Folks that aren't here yet, growth coming to Terrell, that's correct. Future,
much in employment, it's mostly because we,
it's roughly 2 to 1.
2 to 1.
Yeah.
Employment versus,
Population to employment.
okay, I heard not much growth in employment, so that's.
Oh, no, in that one service area, that far east. Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, we can come back to more questions. All right, so I think we'll just keep
Yeah, we
moving
can
here.
keep moving, yeah. So similar to what Eddie was just talking about on the roadway side, we're looking at service units for water and wastewater. The basis of that is a meter. Your base meter is a 5/8 by 3/4, so that's for one single-family home, that's typically what kind of meter you would have. That's one service unit equivalent. And if a development needs more water, then they have a larger meter and the service unit equivalent goes up. So we actually got specifications for the meters that are installed here in the city of Terrell. And we've looked at the capacities for each of those meter sizes. And that's summarized on the table on the left side of the screen. So you can see as you get up to like an 8-inch or 10-inch, it's exponentially higher, but it's because there's just a lot more flow going through it and it's a larger impact on their water system or on the wastewater system. So you can see on the table on the right, the farthest left columns, you can see the 2023 meters summarized, and you can see, it is primarily residential with about 5,400, more than that, of that single-family size of the 6,000 or so meters. So it is primarily a lot of residential meters today. And then you can see the growth in 2033 meters based on population and employment. We've escalated the existing meters to count for all that growth, and then we calculate also equivalent service units. So really what matters in this whole table is that far right column, and that's the growth in service units. So we're looking at all of our capital improvements that are serving growth over the next 10 years, and then dividing that by the growth in service units. And that's how we get the impact per service unit or impact per single family home. This table has a lot of numbers on it, and we're not going to go through it in very much detail, but this summarizes all of the existing projects as well as the proposed projects. So for every single project, we look at what is the utilization today in the model, what is the utilization in 2033, and that's established by the flow through each pipeline using those hydraulic models, and then what is that difference? So how much more utilized is it in 10 years compared to today? Most of these don't have any utilization today because they're not built yet. And then we multiply the cost by that percent utilization that they're kind of using in the next 10 years to to come up with our eligible cost. So that far right column is our eligible cost, and that's what we use as our basis to calculate impact fee, maximum allowable. And then the next slide, I think, is wastewater. So it's very similar. We looked at every single project, the red and the orange on that map that we saw earlier, and then looked at the utilization in the model, and then we pair that with the cost to come up with our eligible cost. So this table really summarizes our calculations. I know it's a lot of numbers. That top row is total eligible costs. You'll notice that these are a little bit higher than what you saw on the two previous slides, and that's because we do add in financing costs. Chapter 395 allows it, and so we are assuming a 3% rate based on talking to city staff, and that's what we've done in the previous several studies as well. So we take that number and then divide that by the 10,774, which is the growth in service units that we just looked at. And then when you do that calculation, then you get the maximum impact fee without the credit. And Eddie mentioned, we are taking just that 50% credit as part of this project instead of doing the detailed credit calculation. And so really what you get down to is that bold number that has the gray background. So that's your maximum allowable for water and wastewater for this study. So it's over $5,000 for water and right around $5,000 for wastewater. And you will see that it is a lot higher than what you're currently charging for both water and wastewater. I think there's several reasons for why it's a lot higher this study. As Eddie mentioned, we did the last study in 2018 and 2019, and costs of materials has more than doubled since then, unfortunately. COVID happened, and we are actually finally seeing it kind of level out. We're not seeing it continue to escalate, so that is good. But cost of material is just a lot higher than the study we did previously 5 years ago. I think one other contributing factor for water and wastewater is just expanding into some new areas where you don't have any infrastructure today. We're looking at that a lot more in this study than we did previously, and so that's also making the cost a little bit higher. I think what got printed is a little bit of an outdated version. We tweaked a few things. I think one water project changed costs, and I don't know what roadway changed, but it's a little bit different.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Oh, that's the 555.
Interest.
Oh, and we did financing. We included financing in the previous study. We did 3%. We used the same assumptions and calculations in the previous studies. We did. Sorry, if I said what we did, we didn't. We definitely did.
That was included in this price, right?
Yes. Yeah, so you'll notice in that table, summary table, that top row is higher than the previous slides, and that's the difference, is the financing costs for the projects. All right, Eddie's gonna cover the last few slides.
Okay.
We're in the home stretch.
What this table reflects is what were the collection rates by infrastructure component. In 2019, since the cost per service unit went up significantly, the thought was the city wanted to incrementally increase it. That's why you have April 2nd, 19, 20, 21, there was an incremental increase as opposed to a one big step increase. And so what this reflects is the cost for a single-family residence, I believe, because we show the roadway number. You might recall the roadway numbers, there was like 14 and there was a 15. But the adopted collection rate was 913. So Melissa talks about a service unit being that 1-inch meter. For roads, we have that, what does it cost to put a unit of road on the ground? But then we have what's called a land use equivalency table. Because land uses generate traffic differently, residential, from fast food, from daycare, from furniture store, from distribution center. It all generates differently. The approach is, what's the cost to put a unit of road on the ground based on how much demand a development has? And with that equivalency, you can calculate based on the traffic characteristics. So the bigger the facility or the greater the generator, the higher the fee. So what this table was the end result collection rate, the cost for one residential unit, okay? So roughly 5,000, 5,300, and increased by a couple $100 every year to about 6,500 right now. All right. So, on the next slide, rather than fee, we're talking that cost per service unit, just the cost per service unit, okay? So what we have in the green columns, the first green column is what was the collection rate back then? What was the maximum the calculated one in the first green column on the left. The second one was the policy decision by council on what it should be. And then the far right column are the new calculated numbers, okay? So for water, wastewater, the decision was collect the max, collect at 50%. But for roads, it was like, well, we want to give a break or we want to encourage the development. So the decision was to collect $9.13 per service unit. It bumped up over time. So $9.13 was the last one in 2023 or 24. So that's the current collection rate per service unit for roads for the east and west. So now as you, and you can see there's a lot of technical to get to this bottom line, okay? What is it, the unit cost? What you're going to be asked to contemplate in your final acts to council and your recommendation letter is, number one, do you have comments on the LUA, the CIP, and the impact fee, the technical derivation. But then two, if you have a recommendation on what to collect, okay? So that'll be within the chairman's letter, but you all will be deciding what to do there, okay? So you can see that in the case of water, we go from 1221 up to 5554, wastewater 2167 to 4887, and then roads from 913 to anywhere from 0 to 1387 and up, okay? So and so what we've done is to kind of help you out on what does this mean in terms of something logical. Hopefully on the next slide is the benchmark slide. Yes, there it is. All right, we've said, okay, so that's the cost per service unit or the rate. What does that mean in terms of an impact fee? So this scenario is the actual impact fee for one single family resident. So it takes that road, the cost per service unit, an assumption, times its service unit equivalent in the green box. I've assumed that, if you could go back to the last slide, please. So you were at for roads, you're collecting at 913. I've assumed that maybe you might only want to bump up to 1387, just an assumption. That's a 50% increase on the cost per service unit, by the way, okay? So if you fast forwarded, so if you were to say, you know what, we're gonna collect 1387 where we can across the board, obviously in east it will be 0 because there's nothing there. But if you did 1387 times the service unit equivalent of 3.22 for a single family residential, then this represents the impact fee, okay? So what we have here is what we call benchmarking. You can see all these different cities, and this is what they're actually collecting based on their ordinance, okay? And when their ordinance was last adopted. But in Flower Mound, the actual impact fee for one single family residence is $17,084, okay? And you see it's color coded. Here's the water piece, there's the wastewater in blue, and then green is the road impact fee, okay? Most of these numbers for roads are an average number, right? Each city has multiple service areas. We just took the middle of the road average. All right, so we have all these communities, Flower Mound, Mesquite, Midlothian, Prosper, Salina, Sunnyvale, Mansfield, Rockwall, The far right column here, the Terrell current. So if you add the three components up, you're currently collecting for one single family residence almost $6,500, okay? Based on the new calculation and assuming that road is 1387, we took the lowest one of them all and just used that across the board, you could collect up to as high as $14,907 for a single. Well, who would be building?
So we're collecting $14,907 from developers.
That's correct, per unit in this scenario.
Impact our people that live in currently.
Okay, so let's take a step back here. Remember, this is future development coming to the city. This is future impact to your infrastructure. And this is impact and the cost of that impact. You may decide $14,900, way too much. $6,400, $6,500, okay, we'll go with some percentage increase, and you'll come up with whatever number. But that is the cost of that impact. Those roads on that CIP, the water, wastewater facilities identified, those are gonna be built over time, and the cost to put those on the ground is the burden that is put upon the city. So if you ask new development to share in that cost, in this case, you're currently collecting at 50%, they're only gonna be paying at that maximum collection rate of 50%. There's still a burden to the city. Yeah. Okay?
Like, if this is coming just from developers, the spreadsheet looks, you know. What I wanna understand, because we are in a transition as a town, and we all know that, I guess, can we all speak candidly here? Is this okay? I don't know. But we're in a spot where there's a potential for gentrification to actually occur, where folks can no longer afford to live here, that have lived here their whole lives. And so, what I wanna know is this for developers, ergo, all of this is something that developers paying for that doesn't impact the people that live here? Or is there another slide that says things are gonna go up and we're also gonna impact the people that live here to help pay for growth? Because I wanna know what the citizens are paying for
Yeah.
for that growth. That's more important to me.
So you're asking for a much more complicated analysis that's not part of this scope. What we're saying here, I'm sorry, I'm not pointing. What we're saying here is that based on this CIP, water, wastewater, and roads, and what it costs to put those facilities on the ground, and how you allocate it on a unit cost basis, that's what that impact is. At the maximum you collect, that impact is $14,900. If you decide to choose a collection rate that's something less, and you want to, that's within policy, right?
But then the city has to come up with that money, and you have to tax the people.
That's correct. That's right.
Now,
What I'm trying to understand is how it's gonna affect the folks. Is there another side to this that might negatively impact the citizens? I'm totally cool having developers pay as much as possible, because they should invest in
Yeah.
our city.
So,
So you're right on track of what your concern is. And yes, when an individual wants to come and build a house, they're gonna be assessed the impact fee. So what their charge and their scope of work was, is part of the 395 rule, is to calculate what that impact was. You, as a committee, you have the ability, to keep it the same. Or I guess you could lower it.
they could, well,
now, excuse me,
yeah, that's correct.
So my point is this, is there's basically, here we are today, and then here's the max that's calculated based off all the construction of roads, water, sewer, et cetera. So that's the impact on down the road. So this impact is kind of like helping pay forward. But the other side of the coin is, as many of you just recognized, the city picks up the other burden of the part. So if you want to go real lenient, let's keep it the same. Now you just put more of the burden. Now the city is now more under the water of trying to get the other half of the road or et cetera. So it's a delicate thing that you're just gonna have to get comfortable with where it is.
Yeah, it's gotta be a balance, though, to bring in certain things, you don't wanna have such a high impact fee that.
You could
that
defer
you've got people
and you
who-
could push
and
people away.
Say, we're not coming.
So that's kind of where I'm headed, like, at some point in time, why couldn't we be bold? Because we're talking, this is just us brainstorming, and say, because we know that there are a lot of citizens that have angst about growth, right? And I'm not anti-growth. I want to be clear on that. I'm about smart, mindful growth, quality spaces, environments that people can actually like walk and love and enjoy, and not just sprawl. So there's my stance on this. But this is why I'm asking the question: why couldn't we be bold and say, developers, you want to build out here? You get to do it. Just put it in. And I'm not saying that's the right answer. I recognize that's extreme.
And that's
extreme.
That's
My law-
generally the position we are in when we sit with Mr. Pearson, okay? You are gonna pony up and he's gonna build 9th Street. So that's how you kind of skirt some of that and you get the benefit of a developer. They don't like it.
Can't never go one way or the other.
Yeah, I've got one developer that is like, no. And we're at a stopping point, but that's the position and I'm not moving.
Because then you're gonna want that big grocery store here that you don't have right now, and you're not gonna get them because your impact fee is.
Okay. It's
That's-
a big ticket item.
Yeah.
But if your impact fee is low, you'll get 5,000 home
Yeah, that's
neighborhoods,
our
which
job.
burden the
Our
infrastructure,
job is
right?
to
Like
find
that's,
that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like the fine balance is,
It's gonna be a hard position, because you gotta keep in mind too, we're, just like right now, we're having to overlay roads or fix roads. Okay, and if you're looking at this, we charge, what, 913, they dropped it down because of the roads,
yeah.
you know?
I mean, I love
It's gonna grow, and we can collect, what, 50%, correct?
Up to that
Up
50%
to 50%.
threshold. Well, because we decided at the outset of study that we would not do that credit analysis that would show where that number would be.
You just chose the 50%.
In working with staff, we scoped the credit.
Chapter 395
Yeah,
says,
yeah.
50% or
That's
credit.
correct.
And all of, I mean, I guess I've been doing this is my 4th update, I think, with the city, we've always done 50% credit, or 50%.
Yeah, because it would, it would raise the burden such that the development community would start saying, well, of course, they're gonna first say, well, we'll just go somewhere else to develop.
Say,
Number
well,
one,
40.
but then number two, there are other strategies that the city is entertaining for development, right? You got some major employer-type development coming, and so that might thwart some of that. So there's some of that economic development consideration that comes into play. And so what we're trying to keep it simple, because this is it's a bigger discussion. And so to the other side of that question is, where does that money come from? Well, it becomes the tax base, your ad valorem tax rate, how's that gonna get paid for?
Right, the other half is
Right.
paid for by the tax base that's.
Yep.
here.
And the,
You do have and I'm not slanting
Sure.
anyway, so I'm not trying to argue
Right.
one way or the other. I'm just trying to understand
Yep.
and make what I think is the best decision for the citizens who live here, who are already starting to become stretched. You know, we don't, I mean, I think if you look at the demographics, Carol, right? The demographics are such that it's not Frisco. And so we have to be very careful about the tax base that we bring in folks here.
I'm with you. Like I said, it's a delicate position, but
Yeah.
if you choose the conservative approach, you've really put the burden, and your infrastructure will not be intact with the growth. And many of you know areas of Forney and Rockwall that you go, you just avoid. Many of you don't ride their access road on Rockwall because what do? You ride the back road. Okay, y'all know the tricks. And we would do the same thing here, so you gotta be careful if you go ultra-conservative and going, well, I'm gonna continue growth, but I'm gonna control it with my standards, okay? Then you're gonna, more of the burden is on the city to pick up the ticket.
I hope I'm not.
no,
I don't want people to
it's,
think that I'm.
it's a great, it's a very,
For me, I would be
Yeah.
bolder and force developers to actually pay more.
it's a very valid comment. It is. And this is why we have this discussion, because, and you're going to where ultimately you will be making the recommendation. We go through a lot of technical to figure out that unit cost. Okay, fine, close the books there. All right, then it gets to policy, pure policy. What will be your recommendation to council? What should they consider in that collection rate? Revenue neutral, what we would say revenue neutral for impact fees, if you could flip back. Revenue neutral would say, well, for water, you collect $12.21, for wastewater, $21.67, and for all roads, $9.13 where you can, except for roadway east because it's zero. That would be revenue neutral. That means development community should be extremely happy, no impact fees aren't going up, but, you know, that's within your purview there, yeah.
But if you go back to the other slide, please, ma'am. Right here, if you notice that some of these, for example, Flower Mound, I know it's still growing, and their impact fee is a lot higher than ours, so obviously they're paying it. Same thing with Mesquite, Midlothian, you know, so it's something that, you know, not that I want to be too lenient for us, especially with the growth, and you got to keep in mind, some of this money may be used for some of our streets now that are currently in despair. You know, so that would help. We don't want.
Yeah, I'm not looking to be lenient to developers. What I would actually stretch as much as we possibly think we can get, because at the end of the day, developers coming in will burden the city, whether we like, the pros and cons to both,
Correct.
right?
Right.
So I am all about a higher impact fee, but I wanna make sure as I'm doing this, so
Right, and also what you don't have is like, for example, Forney, 4662. You don't know what their decision was in terms of and what we've done is we looked up their ordinance. But I know because I did the program, they did have a reduced collection on non-residential. They wanted to incentivize non-residential development. That's within your purview. They could say, you know what, residential collect here, non-residential collect here. But, so in the past, Terrell has kept it as one cost. And so we're not,
Real quick, sir, but if you look at Forney, I guess it is kind of small. You see how their growth is so fast and it just congested over there. I mean, I can see compared to what we're paying now. I can see why a developer would want to go over there. But
Sure, but I guess, and so this is a question for you actually, in the city. I mean, because I think everybody knows kind of how I feel. But, you know, I find myself thinking, how much do we actually really want to grow? And how badly do we really want to incentivize developers? Because at the end of the day, I don't know that at this juncture, we're getting the quality that I think Terrell deserves. I think this town could be an unbelievable town. I almost see it like I wish folks would do research and look at Bartonville or Bentonville, Arkansas. If Terrell could become Bentonville, Arkansas, we would have quality and not quantity, and we wouldn't. I mean, everybody should do their research on some of the best small towns in the country, and that's not quite what we're getting right now, because I don't think the developers are coming into the meeting with this town deserves that, and I think it does. And so my question to the city is, why? Like, why is it so important to get so many rooftops?
Well, this is not a directive of us, and we're getting a little sidetracked from where we're going to have to regroup here pretty quick. Or you're getting into a philosophy thing, and I'd love to talk with you because just real quick, we have people coming in that want to build. Okay, and we sitting here talking about developers, but we also have infill lots. You got folks in Stallings, you have folks in various neighborhoods that want to fill a lot that they're impacted too. So, you know, I knew we wasn't going to be able to make a decision tonight. This is to get you dunked in the water and you drown with the facts, because you see where there's going to have to be, you're going to have to find a comfortable spot. Whatever number the committee, you might not feel comfortable, she might not feel comfortable, he's real comfortable. So that's just what you do as a committee. But this is not the one only factor that drives a developer out of town, okay? They're into the multi-million-dollar things. They're not talking $300,000. That's kind of chump change when you, not to me, but in that world, $25 million, $300,000 is noise. So you got to hit that balance.
Would you consider more than a 50%? Does the city feel good
No.
about that, or does it freak you out?
Yeah.
It doesn't freak me out, so I want to know if it freaks you out as an idea. More impact fees.
out of all these cities that we have here, they're all at 50%.
Some vary.
Vary.
We know that Flower Mound, they did the credit analysis. That's why you see them at 17.
Oh.
Let's see, Mesquite. McKinney may have done the credit analysis. I'm not certain.
They did.
They did?
Eugene did
Okay,
it, yeah.
okay. I think Rowlett may have done the credit analysis. So it
this
varies.
This is just one variable in the due diligence of a developer.
Yeah.
If you look at the graph and you're next door, say we're just 2 miles from Flower Mound, where do you think you're going to build? You're coming to Terrell. So it's just one input into the many formulas of their due diligence, and does it money out for them? The impact is relative to the small developer that's putting in anywhere from 5 to 25 homes.
So let me ask that, because you mentioned something that was a really good point. Again, I am all about letting the big developers pay as much as we can get paid, because I think it helps. But the small guys, the infill, let's say we want to revitalize Moore Avenue, and in tandem with the downtown, right? And we want to take some of these empty lots, and we've done an analysis of all the buildings, and we have this really great idea to make the next like Greenville Avenue and, like Green Streets and all that cool stuff.
all new development is subject to the fee. So in this case, maybe the council may have a policy consideration that to incentivize downtown Terrell, historic, that there may be a reduction in 25%. That may be a written policy. But those kind of specific policies, and they can be anywhere from reductions from location, they can be reductions if you reduce, if you reduce traffic, if developer reduces traffic by a certain percentage, we'll reduce the fee. It goes across the board. You have to keep sight of what
That
the
would be
actual
something
cost
that
is.
would be set by us, right? Is that something, for
If-
example, let's
if-
just say we have we do the 14,908, that's what we agreed on. If we do, city council could come in and says, you know what, if.
That's
we're-
right.
We're gonna do something, so that would
That's
be all-
right.
Then that would be up to city council in regards to that.
They could say, thank you
And
very
that's what we
much,
do
we're
with,
going this way. But it's within your purview to make that recommendation,
But we
okay?
could recommend, say, because I know the city's wanting to revitalize downtown, we could recommend, whether they agree to it or not, like in certain areas.
In the letter, that's right, in the letter, you could
So that's-
say,
That's what you as a committee is going to
Yeah.
develop together.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, here's the recommendation. That's why we bring in someone from the pseudo outside of the committee. And that's why Shayne is present in this committee. And you will come up with a recommendation that he will sign, and it will be submitted to the council saying, as the CIAC has recommended these, we'll give this same presentation. These people will do the same job of the weather and explain it, because we have some new council people. So it's gonna be a little first time going through impact fees. That's why we're kind of going a little slow in making this. I don't want to throw it down your throat going, you gotta give me a number tonight. So you'll make that recommendation and we'll take it to the council. Council could say, new sheet, and come up with new numbers. So they're looking at the recommendation from you.
Let me ask you, how, so this is kind of a big decision.
Yes, ma'am.
You know what I mean? And so I don't think it's one that should be, so I recognize there's a timeline here. I also think it's interesting, you say we've had 4 meetings. I bet if you look backwards, I bet not one person that's sitting in this chair today has participated in all those meetings. Because I know one was a year ago. I feel pretty confident half the folks work here. And so now we're, you know, and so just to give you some optics, we're talking about multiple meetings that you guys have had over this stuff. And I bet nobody, when you started this journey, sat in any of these chairs. And so there's a little bit of us kind of, I think, a little bit like, oh,
Well, that was the whole purpose of tonight.
yeah.
And so now we're getting, we need to kind of wrap, we don't keep you here all night, but to wrap up, here's the timeline of what we're looking at of making decisions so you can follow through. And we can send this updated version so you make sure you're looking at the latest number, okay? Because there's a lot of number crunching between these folks here, and it's just not these two folks doing it. They've got a team of folks, but you can kind of see the dates in front of you. So we're looking at June 27th, coming back, and you come up with your final recommendation of what the impact fee needs to be presented to the council.
So are we gonna be having work sessions to really talk about this in greater detail? I mean, because I can't imagine we're gonna come back in a month and be like, hey, this is what we've decided without anybody talking about it. So what's the process for that?
I'm gonna leave that up to the team from there. Okay, I don't want to direct that. But the other side point of that, if each of you want to have an individual meeting with us, we can schedule that, and I can get these folks involved, they can Zoom in from us, with us, and we can address your questions and more specifics, and, you know, or we can do it over the phone, just one question, I don't know. So I'm gonna leave that up.
Outside of a meeting. We can workshop it but you can't have a meeting. Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, because then we'll have a quorum, and
Yeah.
then it takes a public notice. So
I was asking what the process was, I wasn't sure.
the public notice is 15 days, right?
for the CAC?
No,
For the public
to
hearing?
have another meeting.
Oh,
Anytime we have a meeting, we have to get the public notice, and it's 15 days. So you see the time clock? It's
If we were to have a workshop, that just, just a one day to sit there and look at this. Is there a time frame you commissioners would like to sit down to have a workshop? So we can discuss this on, a couple hours, or is that suitable for staff that we can meet? In case we have any questions, that way, by the time we have the next meeting, we'll have, shouldn't take us, 4 or 5, maybe one workshop if we need to move to a second one, just to better understand these fees. That's something suitable for your commissioners, to have a workshop to go over these?
Depends on the time for me
Okay.
in the day.
What if we, I give you, by mid-Wednesday, let us know
Well,
on a time frame?
you're gonna need to let us know here pretty quick, because I got
Well, how
a
about-
June 27th date here that we need to back up, and I need to back up 15 days, and
And I won't be here on the 27th.
so,
Well, for just the executive workshop, we don't have to give 15-day notice and all, it's not a public meeting, right? We're just doing a workshop, right?
it still has to be posted if we're gonna have a quorum.
Yeah. Okay. For the
So why
executive
are
session.
we doing this, why didn't we do this last month or a couple months ago and give us time to work through it all?
It's a very long process, yeah.
It just also feels very rushed. I mean, so then it's like, I would be like, well, gosh, if we have to rush it, then let's do that.
You know, you can look and analyze the numbers, but it's gonna come back to where you're gonna feel comfortable in there. You can go in and understand the weeds and what the wheel turns what gear and all that. That's fine. I'd love to do that. Makes you educated on what it is and what's out there, but,
We also gotta keep in mind that, they've already done a lot of their homework in regards to this. Always gonna, they've already made a recommendation to us, which is this right here.
Well, the 15 is not their recommendation.
It's really the highest.
No, that's just, what I mean.
That's what the cost.
Correct, is what we're looking at. Now, we could reduce this a little bit, go down with, in regards to that, to some of these numbers. But, to be honest with you, I personally wouldn't want to go down too far, much down, because expenses are high. They're coming. Whether we like it or not, they're on their way.
Oh, one thing I would like to ask though, because you said you didn't, escalate. And I feel like once things go up, they rarely go down. And so to say that you're giving, like the city may have to like pay back because costs go down, I don't I'd love to see the statistical data that has happened
So- Yeah, and you're right. They most likely go up, but the program has to be updated at least by law every 5 years. We're updating Forney here in year 2. They're asking us to do it a lot sooner, only because of escalation. So within your purview, if you feel like, man, those construction costs, let's take a look at it in year 2, and you feel like, yeah, we better take an in-depth dive, then you write a letter to the city staff. They get then there's a recommendation to council to look at it something sooner. But still, because we don't know, and we don't want to put you in a refund situation. That's why there's that level of conservative in there. Yeah.
The city staff, y'all deal with developers daily, weekly, daily at least. Do you have a feel for where this should be, a recommendation on where those impact fees? In other words, when do we lose the developer? When do they back up and walk away? And do you have a feel for that?
so Randy, if I could give you the exact answer to that, I would be at the casino or somewhere doing that. To answer your question honestly, it depends on the developer. I have one developer that just feels like he's using pennies and rubbing pennies and that type of thing. And then I have some developers that this is just a little bit of bump in the road noise because of the volume of the house, okay? And they have different means to do that. So it varies from point to point. Does it need to go up? Yes, okay? That's easily understood. Now, I'm not going to give you a number to sway, but I can just say, yes, it needs to go up. Now, there is going to be a break point at the price of where it is at the max that we can allow. I can pretty much assure you, you're going to run a lot of people out of town.
But do you think we'll run a lot of people out of town, or do you think we'll
No, it becomes a cost issue. When you went from about a $6,000, $7,000 house impact to about a $28,000 to $35,000 hit, that builder, and you, if you were personally building, that's a big hit, a $35,000 hit. And that's kind of like getting the building permit part.
I guess where I'm asking, and I don't want to keep everybody, because this is a great conversation, so I can go down a rabbit hole on it. But in terms of the developer, you know, there are some developers that will build a certain scale, quality, et cetera, where the cost of the impact fee is like, would we get actually
No, it's based off units.
developers than like these developers that are just doing rental property all over the great place?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
The impact fee is not based off the quality of the house or how many windows you have or any of the ancillary things of that. So it doesn't get into that. It's based off the number of units, the size of the water meters, because the size of the water meter determines the impact that you're putting on me as a city and the size of the sewer connection. So that, if you saw there was a roadway, wastewater, and a water, and those are your two fees, three fees.
Commissioner, one thing we gotta keep in mind too is, if you look at it on the builder side or the developer side, this cost, it's actually go back out to the owner or to the buyer. You know what I mean? So whether we go, and if you're looking at, we got Mesquite, we got Flower Mound, they're within 1 or 2 years already close to what, you know, what we wanna go to, and they've already been doing it, and they're still, because developers are gonna develop, they're gonna build, whether one way or the other. And the thing is if we need to get this done, you know what I mean? Oh, I understand that. But if we go high, like I said, even if we go high, we're not gonna, if we run off some developers, they're gonna eventually come back. We just gotta, we gotta stick to the guns and get a price that's comfortable for us, you know? I think, you know, if we're in that market area or we're in this area compared to the other cities, it's fine with me, you know?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the 14.9, and I had some reservations about the 15, but the 14.907, I'm very comfortable with. I don't know if we could say not to exceed, you know, 14.907, and then not to go below 1,300, you know, something like that.
And a lot of advisory committees will actually put that in their letter, like, hey, council, we think you should charge up to the maximum allowable, kind of like you decide, we're comfortable with that maximum allowable.
That's what I would suggest.
So I know sometimes they're like,
Yeah,
oh, we don't
so-
want the advisory committee to do something lower, and the council comes back and be like, oh, we want to go higher. So
And I think that's
it
what
gives them
you're,
kind of leverage.
yeah.
That's the thing we should get at.
And two, if we would give, allowing the max allowable too, that then gives the city council the leeway to have some, to incentivize. Because like, you know, some things for me, my interest is seeing that maybe developers are putting some properties or different things that are more affordable, that may have some, you know, incentives to allow middle class, some other economic, so where the city can give some incentives with that. Where if you give us 10% of the homes are this type of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
we can-
And that's part of the development agreement
Is there
discussion.
anything that you can show us on these ones that have changed theirs more recently? I would say 2020, 2023 Midlothian, 2022 Mesquite, what theirs was prior?
What's down here at the bottom?
Like,
On the communities that we've done, we can show maybe the percentage increase of what they went from one program to another.
or can we look, I guess we could go online.
Yeah, we would just have to pull the old
Previous
ordinance,
ordinances,
and we'd
yeah.
have to see, but what's beneficial for y'all? Is it to find out what percentage increase did they go from the previous program? It was a 25% hike from the previous program? Are you looking for an overall number or individually by infrastructure type? I would think it'd be like, all right, how much did Forney go to from 2017 to 2022? 25%, or whatever that number is.
Is that what you're really wanting to know?
I'm looking for something like that that shows me that they made this.
That others
So
are
kinda-
increasing?
So
So we're looking at,
do we want to go 25% or do we want to go 20%? To kind of give you, I think that is what you're going to be in your discussion of your workshop. I don't think you're really going to go in to say, how many units are in the west?
Yeah, no.
How many, what size road is that on there? I think you're going to be dying with data. I think more of the open discussion is, where do you collaborate together to come up with a consensus decision of what do we want to recommend to what do you want to recommend to the council? Okay?
And just like you said, because it's not only affecting developers, but it affects the small man to the individual people who are trying to build.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to, we use that word very heavily, developer. We're going to punch them in the face and in the gut and make them pay. Well, be careful. You just killed your neighbor.
That's correct.
Or they want to build a house next to you, or your daughter, you want to build the land. You just killed your,
It's not just.
Yep. That's exactly, you're exactly right, ma'am. It's the local and the mom and pop that have that burden too. The bigs, they build that into their pro forma. And it's the local where the impact's felt a little bit more.
Running nobody off.
so to wrap up here, let's, somehow we need to corral another time. I'm gonna charge Jana with trying to look at our calendar here. And I know this might be a crunch, someone might not be able to make it, but we're gonna see if we can make another period of time where we can have just a workshop discussion of this. And we'll need those dates, and we'll try to work those.
Be able to get us some of this data, or are we expected?
I think we'll be able to get a couple of those cities that we've prepared the programs for. I think we'll be able to get that relatively quickly.
That would help.
Yeah.
If we had that before anything else, it would help me to be able to.
Kind of make you comfortable.
Maybe some of the ones closer to Terrell.
Yes.
Of Rockball, of Forney.
Or
Mesquite.
comparable in size. There's, the other thing you gotta look at, if you look at just size, you might have it compared to someone who's not growing. The whole reason the numbers are going up is because we're
We
growing.
also have to think about what's their tax base there too, because you got different tax bases
Yeah.
in some of these places
Yeah.
that they can
Yeah.
cover some things in.
That's why it's hard to wrap your arms around the whole thing and come up with one little bullet that just fixes it.
Do that and use zoning to look at.
Yeah.
Okay?
But
think the
just know
tax
that it's gonna
base-
be different for different reasons, right? Your position, your location relative to downtown Dallas, which might be the same as Waxahachie to downtown or Midlothian, they have different things going on. And so, and that's where we can get wrapped around the axle, so we gotta be careful what we ask for, yeah.
While we think about this,
Development, even the single, if someone wants to build a house, they're paying that impact. Absolutely.
and they're gonna pass it along, so the current tax base, I've been thinking about this since you said, what about the people that are here now? Our rate is pretty high, because our overall value is lower than most of the communities around us. If we overcharge the developers, they're coming, they're just gonna pass it along, and the cost of the houses are gonna go up. And then the comparative cost of houses for all of us who already live here is gonna go up with it. And so. It will, but I think something to think about is what these guys are gonna be charging in the future because of what we're charging them. That's just gotta be part of the balanced discussion, I think, because they're just gonna charge more for the houses, which is just
Yeah.
gonna continue to drive up value.
So Randy, back to the point, does it really push the developer away? In some cases, the little guy, maybe, the big guy, he's just gonna pass that cost right on to you when you buy the house.
Yeah.
So now your house just went up $25,000.
But on the flip side, you lower it, and the city pays for it, and they raise their taxes on the people living here for the privilege of someone else growing and
Maybe,
expanding.
depending on what
Right.
kind of business you brought in.
That's a big maybe, that's a big maybe. Because
You're right. That sword cuts a little deeper on that direction, so. Anyway, we need to come up with a way to come up with a date, so be looking at your email. We'll start working on that tomorrow to get some possible dates. I'm gonna ask for your support, that once we send those emails out, we need a response, because you can see our time schedule. It's pretty tight, and, but that's the only way we can keep this wheel going. Otherwise, we could just drag it on forever, and we don't need to do that. It's where we want to get comfortable.
Other stuff pretty quickly, then I think that'll help each of us.
For any commissioners unable to make it, if you like, just go ahead and send in a number that you're comfortable with, because that way we'll have something else also to look at.
Right.
Please.
What'd you say, if you can't?
If you can't attend, if you can't attend, that way we can have that number to compare it to.
Mr. Chairman, if I could bring up one other item, not to muddy up the waters. That's, right. You know, roads are fun because we're dealing with 5 service area, really it's 4. So we're probably gonna come up with something that's uniform across the road so that takes that out of the equation. The other thing that really makes this fun is we only talked about one single-family dwelling unit. When we're talking about non-residential development, and we're talking a 100,000 square foot shopping center, or a super Target, or a 200,000 square foot fulfillment center, if you go that 50% rate, that fee, I mean, it's not uncommon to see $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in fees because size and impact. But I think it might be prudent that we might have one non-residential scenario, just so you can see what that implication is. So if you were to pick one land use type, and we might not be able to get all these cities, we might be able to get more of the closer ones, but what type of land use might be the one to look at that might be most effective for y'all to see? Is it an office? Is it a commercial site? Is it an industrial type site?
So I would say, right now, we have a facility on Apache Trail that's just being built. They don't even have a CO yet, but they're all built. It's 110,000 square foot. It's a beautiful place. He's done huh? Yeah. Well, it's like, it could be, it's I would say multi-use.
Multi-tenant.
We talked about uses earlier, and you talked about, well, how do you decide? Well, he wanted to go in, I don't know what tenant I'm gonna put in there, so he had to go in there with all possible avenues to fix. What that did is that required him to put in fire suppression, which is super costly. 110,000 square feet is like a Walmart could fit inside this thing, okay? So that's one non-residential area that could be used. You know, a restaurant or.
I would say let's try to keep it general. Mixed use is a different animal altogether because you got internal capture, you got different uses, different.
Yeah, don't complicate it.
Yeah, let's try to keep it a single land
Like a
use
commercial,
type.
Just a basic commercial.
A commercial, like a strip center or like a
center's
big
fine.
box. So like a strip center might be 40,000, 50,000 square
Yeah.
feet, which is kind of bigger. Or is it
That's
a,
typically what we're gonna run into is the 40 to 100,000 feet.
okay.
Yes.
You get over that, to
Then you'll
give
be-
you a rim of, you're talking a super Walmart and, you know, maybe a Sam's and Walmart tied together, that type of complex. We just don't really have the real estate in some areas to do that.
Yeah, strip center area would be fine.
So, okay,
Dallas, right? Like, is it the Hill in
On
Dallas?
Home 75?
Yeah, like something like if there are things aspirational that we would want here, like what that would look like. But
we could, but let's do this, and I want it to be something that y'all can be thinking in your head. What if we did like 25,000 square feet of shopping commercial, like a retail center? 25,000 square, because then it's scalable in your mind, okay? 50,000 square foot strip center, 100,000 square foot Walmart. You'll be able to see a number, and we'll try to get 4 or 5 cities close by a peer city.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoever you think are maybe 4 or 5 peer cities, but
Right.
that might help you on the non-residential side because this is you're all over it, right? We did a lot of technical, that's the bulk of the work, but then it's the policy side, and this is where things get deep. And so ultimately, and here's what we could do. We might, for this workshop, we might help craft a letter, send it to you all as a draft. It'll be a Word document that we send to you because you all write this thing, but it might be how it might lay out, so you have some kind of framework of what a recommendation might look like, just something that you can start from. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Like you said, ranges, maybe. We may say, no less than this, but that.
Oh, like to council, consider up to 50, and that's, quite frankly, we wanted to whet your appetite with all the technical stuff today, but what's gonna happen in June, and I'm glad you wanna have a workshop. And that's where it gets deep, but you may not come up to a resolution with something, and you might wanna say, golly, let's just make it easy. Council, consider collecting up to 50%. I know that the city manager wants you all to make a recommendation, but maybe that's it, I don't know.
Hey, you can you can make it really complicated.